Welcome to the Yale Center for British Arts online series, At Home Artists in Conversation. I'm Abigail Lamphier, Senior Curatorial Assistant in the Department of Paintings and Sculpture at the Center, and I'm delighted to welcome artist Titus Kaphar and art collectors Arthur Lewis and Hau Nguyen to our program today. This is also the third and final program in our online symposium, The Politics of the Portrait, which considers the history, display, and making of portraits and the role of representation in today's sociopolitical climate. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this program will be recorded. Your camera and sound are muted and will remain so throughout the program. We will be using the Q&A feature located on your navigation bar to gather your questions, and they will be answered at the end, but please feel free to submit questions at any time during the program. Yale University acknowledges that Indigenous people and nations, including Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scotiabank, Golden Hill Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac and other Algonquin-speaking people have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between these people and nations and this land. Titus Kaphar is an American artist who works across media to examine the history of pictorial representation. He physically manipulates his canvases by cutting, twisting, breaking, and tearing, reconfiguring historical works of art to reveal unspoken truths and overlooked subjects. His practice challenges art historical images and the narratives they normalize. Kaphar, whose work is represented in collections across the country and internationally, received his MFA from the Yale School of Art in 2006 and is a recipient of numerous prizes and awards, including a MacArthur Fellowship, an Art for Justice Fund grant, and a Robert R. Rauschenberg Artist as Activist grant. He lives and works in New Haven, Connecticut, and remains committed to the city. In 2015, Kaphar co-founded NXTHVN, a 40,000 square foot nonprofit arts incubator located in the Dixwell neighborhood of New Haven. NXTHVN offers fellowships, residencies, and other professional development opportunities to artists, curators, and students in the local community and beyond. Arthur Lewis and Hau Nguyen have built an art collection renowned for its focus on contemporary women artists and artists of color, and were named among the top 200 art collectors by Art News in 2020. For more than a decade, the couple have supported Black artists and developed their local art community in Los Angeles. As a result, the core of their collection features both emerging and established artists, including Genevieve Gaignard, Jenny C. Jones, Titus Kaphar, Carrie James Marshall, Ebony G. Patterson, and Amy Sherrill. So what brings us here today? In October of 2020, Arthur and Hau lent Titus's Enough About You to the Yale Center for British Art, where it was on view in the center's galleries for 8 months, replacing an 18th century group portrait, Elihu Yale, with members of his family and an enslaved child. This painting in the center's collection, featuring Yale University's early benefactor and namesake, is the focus of an ongoing research project. It became the springboard for a series of conversations among artists, collectors, curators, and scholars to consider potential approaches, revisions, and additions to the canon of art history, curating, and art making. Everyone at the center was really excited to see the intervention of Enough About You in the collection galleries. The physical act of replacing the historical portrait felt energizing and important. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has dragged on longer than any of us anticipated, and it had to be taken down in late May and returned before we reopened to the public. Since then, we have intentionally left the wall blank as a moment to pause and reflect and to listen to our audiences. A text panel explaining the omission invites visitors to share their thoughts through the center's website, and I invite everyone on the call today to give us your feedback. That Enough About You's next public appearance will be at LACMA's Obama Portraits exhibition this fall speaks to the painting's impact beyond New Haven. However, it was created at a significant moment in the university's history. In June of 2016, Yale employee Corey Menifee shattered a stained glass window depicting enslaved workers carrying bales of cotton in the dining hall of Calhoun College where he worked. Fed up with seeing this image every day, he had literally had enough. An act of iconoclasm not unlike the practice of image breaking and remaking that produced Enough About You. In the wake of that event came a renewed call to change the name of the residential college, named after 19th century anti-abolitionist John C. Calhoun. The following year, it was decided the college would be renamed in honor of mathematician, computer pioneer, and public servant Grace Murray Hopper. And in 2020, the Yale and Slavery Working Group was established to undertake a thorough investigation of Yale's historic involvement and associations with slavery and its aftermath. So welcome, Titus, Arthur, and Hau. It's an honor to be with you today. And perhaps we could start off, we could learn a little from Titus about how Enough About You came to be, and also hear from Arthur and Hau about what it's like living with this work of art.
Hi, everybody. I saw this original painting and was disturbed. I guess the same way I think any reasonable person would be disturbed. The same way we are often, as people of color, disturbed when we walk into institutions and the only depictions we see of ourselves are impoverished, enslaved, or in servitude. And I have a practice that allows me to manipulate that, to alter that, to change that. And as everything was going on Yale's campus that you already mentioned, Jane, I decided to dig into this portrait. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just started by a remaking of the portrait, which in my practice is kind of how it works. I sort of spend the time, I invest in the process of, to some degree, doing what that original artist did, and then undoing what that artist's intention might have been. So I made the painting and was struck by how poorly painted the Black figure in the composition was. And there was just no way I was gonna put that out in the world. And so my friend, my collaborator, Reginald Dwayne Betts, was by my studio and he brought his son over to the studio and we were hanging out while I was working on this piece. And Makai walked in and I was like, hey, Makai, come here, sit down, let me take a picture of you real quick. And Makai became this new character. And Makai is a bold, brilliant, intelligent child. And it was important for me to be able to see a person in there, because when you're looking at the representation you see on the left here, what you see is a caricature. You don't see the life of a human being. You don't see that like glistening of hope in his eyes. You don't see that there is a future in his experience. So it was really helpful for me to be able to find, this little boy who I spent so much time with, my children grew up with, to paint him in this place. And after I painted him, it became very clear that the painting wasn't about Yale. And the title happened because as I was working on the painting, I felt like I kept hearing the voices of those characters talking about all the important things that they had done and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, enough. And that's when I put the frame around him. And it's kind of like this protection. It's this force field in some ways that keeps that other stuff out.
I remember, Titus, my first encounter with you was via a voicemail about this work. And I don't know if you remember this, but you changed the orientation of the work. And I didn't realize you, A, had my phone number, and B, I'm like, who is this person calling me, telling me that they changed my painting? Like, who is this guy? And it took me like several plays. And I remember, calling Hau panicked. I'm like, some guys changed this thing. And I'd love for you to just tell people why you did that, because it's something that we've shown it in both ways, but this is a really powerful example of you just owning your practice from beginning to end, which is really rather extraordinary.
This is why I'm no good at commissions. Because if the painting tells me to go left, I'm going left. I'm sorry. I answer to the painting. I don't answer to you. So in this particular painting, what happened was I felt like the composition was not pointing to this character enough. And so, based on some very traditional classical compositional ideals, I wanted the angles in these lines, these folds, these ripples to be pointing up at the figure. And I wanted, while everything else was tumultuous around him, I wanted him to be solid and centered. So before it was kind of on a horizontal axis, right? And so I just did that.
So, Hau and I have a few questions for you, and I'm going to kick it off to him to ask you the first one, and we'll just have a little conversation.
Titus, I remember a couple months ago you stopped by the house and you were like, "What the hell? You put my Jerome in the kitchen?" It's like, oh my God, I saw you running around like throwing a fit, like, oh shit.
Yes.
Oh man.
Yes. And it's still there. It's still there.
Just let you know, I didn't do that. Arthur did.
Dang, you just got thrown under the bus, Arthur. I mean, look, I said this already, but I'll admit your kitchen is not a normal kitchen, It's like, doesn't have, your traditional cabinets or whatever. But I'm just imagining Arthur frying some chicken and grease flying under the top of my Jerome portrait. And I'm just like, come on.
Oh my goodness, dear God. That's hilarious. Oh man.
But the truth of the matter is I know damn well there's no cooking going on in that traditional sense in that kitchen. That kitchen is more of a gallery than Gagosian is. So like, truth be told, I'm not that concerned about it. I just like messing with it.
Amazing. So Titus, just, this has been such a year for all of us. I think we thought that 2020 was going to be this, wild moment where things just sort of, that was going to be it, and we weren't going to have any more. And it just seems to just keep going. So what has it been like for you? You have the fortune, of being in an amazing studio and surrounded by artists all the time, which I'm very envious of. But like, what has it been like for you over this past couple of years, man, just in this moment of being a painter?
I mean, I think I have two completely different thoughts about how it's been, right? The first side of that is it's been challenging. It's been challenging not to be able to travel. It's been challenging not to see the friends that you want to see. It's been challenging not to be in the institutions, the museums and the galleries in the way that inspires so much of the work. And it's a challenge in the sense that so many people are suffering right now. And I think that has to be acknowledged. On the other hand, what happened once the pandemic hit is my life got quiet again. A lot of stuff just couldn't happen anymore. And this was before people discovered Zoom. And so it just meant me in the studio working a lot. And the result has been probably 4 or 5 different variations on works, projects, ideas that I'd never done before, never thought of before. They look really different from anything that I've ever considered. And it happened because I was locked in. And so I don't know. I think this pandemic has made me transition from a functioning extrovert to an introvert who can, be extroverted when necessary. But I think I'd much rather just be in the studio working.
Very interesting. Well, this next slide is probably one of my favorite moments with you, and it's of you doing your TED Talk. And it's one of these things that anyone who has encountered me and knows you says, "Oh my gosh, have you seen his TED Talk? Have you seen his TED Talk?" I know your thoughts around this particular conversation, but what a pivotal moment for you, man. Like, I feel like it did shift some things, and you tell this extraordinary story of your boys and being in a museum and what that actually meant for you. But would you mind talking about how this moment sort of shifted things for you a little?
I think what was powerful about this moment is it resonated outside of the art world. And I think the art world can be incredibly insular. And there's a way in which those of us who are on the inside think that that is the whole world. And everyone should be paying attention to what is happening in our world. And then there's folks like, my cousins and, family members who couldn't give a rat's, about the art world and what's happening in the art world. And yet they saw that TED Talk and it meant something to them and resonated in a way that I just didn't expect. My initial reaction was I didn't want to do the TED Talk. That's not, as I said, I've been in this transition into introvertedness, and that's the opposite of that, being on stage in front of 3,000 people trying to make a painting. Yeah, so I'm really pleased by the people outside of the art world who have responded to it. I get a lot of emails from elementary school teachers who show it to their kids, high school teachers that show it to their kids. And to me, that's been the real power of the talk.
That's amazing.
Titus, how has your relationship to figuration evolved and changed over the past year as your practice has advanced?
I think it's continually evolving. I think at the beginning of my practice, because of the fact that I'm having conversations with different moments in art history, I paint different ways. So sometimes I'm looking at Renaissance painting, and so there'll be layers and layers and layers of glazing. And then other times I'm looking at Baroque painting, and so that will require a completely different application. And then other times I'm doing something like tropical space, which feels a lot more saturated and bright and bold. And so I think the evolution of my practice has been attempting to collect all of these different approaches to representing flesh, to representing the body, to representing skin, and experimenting with it and using it specifically in specific paintings to do specific things. That is to say that every painting has, in my mind, a different approach to flesh, a different approach to the body, and I use paint to play with that. So while we've had this pandemic and been kind of locked away a little bit, I've been thinking quite a bit about how the body is present even through its absence. So the silhouette, like we're looking at the tropical space paintings right here. I've become fascinated by this idea that these characters, even in their absence, have a strong presence. And been thinking about this idea that the pictorial space is a space of illusion. That is to say, there are no people there. It's oil and pigment mushed around the canvas in a way. And ta-da, there's this magic trick that makes you believe that there's something to look at, that there's depth to this space. And so these paintings are all illusion in a way. But the thing that is real is the absence. That is real in the pictorial space. That is real in our space. When you walk up to that painting, that hole, that absence has a presence. It's actually there. That's the truth. So I've been playing with this idea of absence all along in my work, but I think these particular pieces encapsulate that idea the strongest.
We've been collectors of your work for quite some time now, and I think the joy of watching your practice is being constantly surprised by how innovative you are and just how extraordinary the work is. But I think one of the unexpected consequences of being one of your collectors is living with the work and watching how it evolves with you over time. Mm-hmm. So I think, when Enough About You was first purchased, we had it over the fireplace and loved the work and could not have been happier with it. Then it moved to the main wall, which you see pictured here, which is where it sat for pretty much where its home is. Now it's getting ready for LACMA, but that's where its home is. And I don't think we realized at the time what a moment that was when people walked through the door, because I think it's something that we lived with every day. But I got asked in an interview, which you should never do as a collector, and this, like, what's your favorite piece of art in your home? And I said Enough About You. And it's mostly because, well, A, it's extraordinary, but B, it's because of the conversation it starts with people. It's how powerful that work is. It's how powerful of a storyteller you are. And I don't think that I knew enough to be wise enough to understand that I was going to be living with a piece of history. And I'm getting ready at this thing for the Obama portraits, and it's amazing. And it's Amy Sherrill's painting of Michelle and Kahende's painting of Barack Obama. And one of the things that's really wild is like, you own Titus Kaphar's work. Oh my God, what is he like? You guys work together. What is he like? And it's true, man. I know that sounds crazy to you, but you are a true master painter. And I think so many people look up to you and look to your practice as inspiration. And I know we're going to talk about NXTHVN, but I do want to just for a moment, just have you reflect on what it means to have that kind of progression in the art world, where now, you were a student and now you are teacher to so very many. And it's really inspiring to watch and to be a part of your world.
I appreciate that, man. If I wasn't Black, I'd be blushing. So first, can we acknowledge that your house is not a normal house? Can we just start there? This house is not designed for living. It is designed for art.
It is.
Y'all literally have art on the windows. I have never seen that before. I walked in upstairs. You have art on the ceiling. You have filled every space, every surface with art. So I just got to say that this is not a normal house, not a normal. So I wanted to throw that out there. So if you ever have the opportunity to visit their house, you should definitely do that. Man, I tell the story all the time of being in my critiques at Yale and having my technique blasted, having professors tell me that my painting was so technically bad that they didn't want to talk about the content in the painting. And so I'm still, in a way, I'm still there in my head. I still hold on to that in my head. And I hold on to that because I've stood in front of a Caravaggio and wept. I hold on to that because I went to the Prado and stood in front of Las Meninas and said, I don't think I can ever do that. And so I hold on to that because it gives me something to strive for. I like the fight. I like being the underdog. I like having to chase greatness down. So I don't think I'll ever be able to sit comfortably with the idea that I've somehow arrived at something. I don't see it that way. Maybe I've arrived if you are not looking at Velázquez. But if you're looking at Velázquez, you're like, that dude is like barely. But for me, it's always going to be that drive to keep pushing, to make it magic, right? I want to be, as a painter, I want to be a conjurer. I don't want to just put pretty pictures on the wall. I'm not interested in that. I want to look at a painting first myself and be challenged by the thing that I'm seeing. If I'm challenged by the thing that I'm seeing, when it goes out into the world, I'm sure other people will be as well. That's what keeps me excited in the studio. So the whole work is about a willingness to sacrifice the formal for something more, right? Sacrifice that painting technique. Oh, you made a pretty picture. You painted a pretty picture. Okay, good. Now let's crumple it up. Okay, good. Now let's dip it in tar. Okay, good. Now let's cut a hole in the middle of it, right? It's about this willingness to sacrifice and the idea that maybe in that sacrifice, you can actually reach something higher. And then there's NXTHVN. And NXTHVN is really the opportunity for me to try to open up this art world a little bit. It feels insular. It feels not like the world I grew up in. It's full of different kinds of people. I was, really blessed when I met you two because it feels more like home to me. It feels more like folks. And that's not always what the art world feels like. And so NXTHVN, as I quote unquote became more successful, I felt like I was becoming more and more disconnected from the kinds of communities that I come from. And so initially I was just looking for a studio space, and I found this building in my neighborhood. And with the help of my co-founder, Jason Price, we dug in and built a 45,000 square foot arts accelerator in the Dixwell neighborhood in New Haven. We have this program where we have 7 artists to curators come each year to work with us, and they get a studio space, they get a stipend, they get housing, they get professional development. We have a gallery there. We have a high school apprenticeship program, so all of our artists work with high school students. This, this makes it okay for me, right? Like if it was just about the, you're having another show at another museum, after a while, it's not satisfying. It's cool, like I'm not mad at it, but that's not the thing that wakes me up in the morning. If I say this all the time, if the only thing my kids know about me or say about me when I'm dead was like, oh, my dad was a good painter, I'm not gonna be satisfied with my time here. So trying to do something a little more.
I mean, Next Haven is, I love how modest you're being right now. Next Haven is something really extraordinary, Titus. Like you've changed the art world, you've changed artists' lives. I mean, even curators that are running through this program. I mean, collectors are now just sort of running after these artists, which is sort of wild. So we had when Titus came over, we had quite the hilarious moment because we're smart art collectors here. We're watching everything that's happening in the world. And he's like, that's a Next Haven artist. That's a Next Haven artist. That's a Next Haven. Like, what is happening? So I have to give Hau lots of credit because he was there with Vaughn and Felipe in the beginning, and, having these kids come over and visit. And all of a sudden now they're these superstars in the world, man. And a lot of that is because of you. And I think they would say the same. So it's more than just this beautiful space. You've created this movement now that people are very, very excited about. And I know that I was in high anticipation of what the next class was going to, like, who's coming next? Like, who are we watching for next? So what does it mean to you to watch all of this excitement around this beautiful passion project that's now evolved into this world-class, beautiful program, Titus? You should be really proud.
I mean, so first of all, we don't make great artists, we select great artists. And that has been the secret, really, is selecting the right people. We are not just looking for people who are good at their craft. We're looking for people who are willing to share their practice with this group of high school students who's right in front of you. We are right down the street from Hill House High School, and that's our neighborhood. And so we have kids that come from there and other high schools in New Haven, and we have them introduced to this very high level of art making by people who are willing to share that practice with them. It's pretty exciting for us. I mean, 3 of the kids in this photograph that you're looking at now, they've graduated, and the high school wasn't able to really, because of the pandemic, do all that was needed for their applications to college. So we started a high school college sort of prep program where we could help them get their portfolios and stuff together. And so we got 3 in the college this year. So we're really excited about that. To me, that's the real stuff. That's the real stuff right there. I mean, I'm still confused about the economics of the art world and all of that. And I'm really honored that people like what I do, and I appreciate that. Keep buying it. But at the end of the day, it's really about trying to figure out how I can bring some of those resources back to a neighborhood that I think desperately needs it.
Oh, that's amazing. So I'm going to ask the obvious question, just because I encountered this when we first started doing Zooms together. You're going to have to explain the painting behind you, because it is just ridiculous.
Well, I'll do this just to give you a sense of scale. Hold on. I'm going to have somebody grab the maquette so I can explain what actually is going on. Hold on a sec. Mike, can you go grab the maquette?
I promise everyone this is worth it. It's really cool.
Just to give you a sense of scale. So, you see?
Incredible.
So, it's hard to tell that. I mean, this really shrinks the painting. I've been thinking about Muhammad Ali for a really long time. And I've been thinking about Ali as, what happened?
I made it bigger.
Oh, okay. I've been thinking about Muhammad Ali as a frame for understanding different moments in history. I'm really interested in this silhouette functioning as a frame to understand the American Revolution. And what do I mean by that, by frame? I mean, Muhammad Ali as the empowered, political, spiritual, defiant Black man. And how does having him as a frame change the way we think about the American Revolution? How does it change the way we think about representations of Christianity in the Renaissance? His relationship, obviously, with Islam. How does it change the way that we think about painting itself, the history of painting and Black figures represented in painting? So this particular cartridge, I'm calling it, this insert, because this painting is in fact a puzzle, which you will see in one moment. This particular cartridge is of Watson and the Shark, which I think is a really fascinating painting. And I think it's a fascinating painting because based on Western traditions, this sort of like triangle composition, this Black figure is at the top of that composition. This painting was made, and there are 4 different versions of this painting, and the painting exists in 4 different museums, and not one of the museums acknowledges the Black figure in the composition. And based on Western tradition, that triangle tells us that the thing at the top of that is the most important thing. And so it seems strange to ignore that. So give me one moment here. So I have a meeting next week, and so I made a little maquette to try to explain how this thing works. All right. Oh, wow, I can line it up.
Yeah, you can. That's amazing.
So, right. So this is the frame. Then we ask ourselves, how does thinking about Ali as this empowered, political, spiritual, defiant Black man change the way we think about the American Revolution? So this is the Battle of Bunker Hill here. And so each one of these, this is how the painting behind you works, but it's too big to try to do that on the screen. And so there, as I said, are these kinds of, cartridges that I made, each separate paintings that are sitting here in the studio. And then, as I said to you before, Muhammad Ali changed the way we thought about a lot of different things, not the least of which he was very vocal about is his spiritual practice. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about with one of these cartridges is like that.
So incredible, Titus.
So as we think about the depictions of the Bible, this book that takes place in the Middle East and Africa, and all of our representations don't look anything like that. I think using Ali as a frame calls all of that into question. I'm just playing with that. And so this painting behind you is a puzzle. The piece is called The Puzzled Revolution, and it is a part of a larger sort of opera thing that I'm doing. Each piece is a different movement, and there is a score, which I'm actually working on with the amazing experimental trumpeter, Wadada Leo Smith, who is just phenomenal. If you don't know him, look him up. Crazy stuff. So yeah, that's that piece.
Love that.
So Titus, going on, just talking a little bit more about NXTHVN. What's the process of selecting your artists, and is there a panel that you work with?
Yeah. So we have a panel. It is laborious. It is the hardest part. We get 350 applications for 7 slots. It's really challenging. And they come from all over the world now. We actually have our first international fellow this year, which we're really excited about. And we go through every single one of those applications. Every single one of those applications get looked at. And there's several rounds. And if you make it to the last round and you don't get in, you still get a personal call from me or one of our staff explaining. One of the things that's really difficult is, as an artist, you apply for all these kinds of things and you never know why you didn't get in. And so if folks are actually close, we like to explain that to them and encourage them to sort of apply one more time. So it's a challenging process. It takes a really long time. We have very informed people on the panel who make that final decision. The challenge is, as I said, it's not just about the art. So we go through that selection process and then we interview every single one of those people that has made it to that final round, which ends up being like days of interviews, just trying to select for folks who really understand that our high school apprenticeship program is not a side thing for us. It's fundamental to what we're about.
Amazing. So Titus, you and I started a new relationship this year. Would you mind telling everyone about that and what's happening with you?
What are you talking about? You represent me. That's your job. That's not mine. You're trying to make me work right now. Go ahead.
So this is quite an adventure, and I think you taking your practice to the next place is going to be rather amazing for everyone. So I have so much inside scoop, so I'm trying to be really careful about talking about things, but you are more than just all of the things that you talk about. You are someone who's truly a creator. So now that Hollywood has knocked on your door, my friend, what are you most excited about?
I love film, and I signed with UTA to be able to make films as a director. And I will never stop painting. I will always be painting. And even as I'm making films now, I think of it from a painter's perspective. And so what I'm excited about is trying to transform every frame in a film into a painting. One of my habits that people watching films with me hate is that I pause the film and grab my sketchbook and I start drawing. And I want to make the kind of films that stop people at each frame and make them want to stop and go, all right, let me get my brushes out. I gotta get this. This is just a phenomenal composition. So it's like being able to do the storytelling that I've always been doing in the work, but actually having the other elements that film affords you to tell that story. There are rarely, obviously, audible words in a painting. There are rarely movement actually in a painting, and going into film is allowing me to do that. So far, all of the projects are directly related to the painting series. So all of the research that I've done for the paintings end up in the film. So that's been really great. So the projects that we're talking about right now are Tropical Space as a narrative feature. It's a sort of magic realism story about, frankly, the power of Black mothers. Then there's the Jerome Project, which ends up being a little bit biographical, but it evolves into this kind of broader narrative. And there's a documentary that I'm working on that we are submitting to festivals right now called, oh, new title. I didn't tell you. We got a new title. You want to hear the title?
Yes, sir.
Is Shut Up and Paint.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
I think everyone's going to be really excited when you see what's actually taking place with Titus. I'm incredibly proud of him.
You heard it here first.
Oh, and by the way, this is for my mother who's probably watching. Mom, this is water. I just want you to know I'm drinking water. Right? It's not alcohol. All right. Because she'll see a picture of me drinking alcohol. I'll be at a party or something like that, and she gets all concerned. So it's like, it's early in the morning. It's just water.
I like that. I like that.
Well, we're getting tons of questions in the Q&A, so I would love to send some of those along to you guys if that's
Sounds good.
Great.
great. Let's see, so many questions. You frequently interact with school-age aspiring artists of color. What are some of the comments and questions that these young people have about portraiture as it already exists in the world and as they may contribute to it themselves?
It's interesting because there's a different set of questions I get from a different set of young people. And some of the questions are pretty direct, like, why do you keep destroying your artwork? Like stuff like that. That question comes up a lot from little kids. There was the piece at the Yale Art Gallery. It has these shreds in front of it and then these nails inside of it. And a friend of mine sent me this video of this little kid. He's like 9 years old and he had just seen that painting. And he goes, so this guy, Titus Kaphar, made this amazing painting. And then he put nails in it and he put nails in George Washington. And who does that? Like he just put nails in George Washington. So like I get those kind of comments, which actually are my favorite. I like those, I think the best. But a lot of it is more like, it's cool to see us. It's more that kind of a comment. It's amazing to see us. That in itself, and that's the tragedy, but that in itself is the surprise. That in itself is the shock. That in itself is the thing that is different. And so, you know, I think institutions, museums in particular, are struggling to diversify the people who walk through the door. And I think to some degree that happens by diversifying what's on the walls in the institution. And if you are an institution like the British or something, then what you all did with Enough About You is a good strategy for doing that. In other words, you are an institution that focuses on British art. I'm not British. But you did this thing because it very much spoke directly to the community and to the work that was in the institution. So bringing in contemporary artists to do that. So the questions that I get from young people are different. A lot of young people also ask me about technique and stuff. Like, how do you make the light glisten on the forehead or something like that?
That's great. We have a question for all of you. We're in a moment when Black artists are receiving a massive amount of attention in the commercial art market and auction prices have been skyrocketing. How do you as an artist or collectors feel about this recent trend? Do you celebrate the growing market for Black artists or do you feel trepidation about the long-term effects?
Who asked that question? I love that question. My film is about that question. This film I just told you about is about that question. I feel a lot of trepidation. I'm really, really nervous about it. I am proud and honored to be here in this place in my career, but I'm also at a moment where I'm recognizing that the work that I make is rarely in the homes like Enough About You. That is not the majority of where this work goes. And so when I'm making this work about my personal experience, about my worldview, the way I see the world, I love that it's getting out there to people who don't have that experience, but I struggle with the fact that I want the people who experience the things that I've experienced to be able to engage with the works. And so I think it's a fantastic question. I think the auction prices are bizarre. I mean, like I try very hard to ignore that. I say try because inevitably someone texts me and say, did you see that? And I'm like, I'm trying to ignore that. When we work with our Next Haven Fellows, I tell them all the time, when I have the sort of money conversations about my work, I don't have it in my studio. I don't want that energy in my space. I'll take you out. We'll go to a cafe. We'll go to the office, but I don't want that. I don't even want that to be a part of the thinking inside of the studio. I want to make the things that need to be made. So I have a ton to say about that. Hopefully the film, Shut Up and Paint, coming to theaters near you will speak to that a little bit more eloquently.
Arthur and Hau, do you have any feelings about that? I mean, you've made Enough About You available to the public so much that you told me this is the one painting you hardly get to live with.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think,
which is great for the rest of us.
Yeah, and look, I think that's part of being a collector. I think you can show up in so many different ways. So it's a matter of being part of their the artist's journey to some degree. So, gifting to institutions is incredibly important to us, probably causes more friction between Hau and I than anything else. That, at the end of every year, I'm like, okay, like who's getting presents this year? But it's one of those things that it is really important, and this market is shifting. So I love that Titus mentioned having very direct, honest conversations with the artists and talking about money and talking about what it actually means to, be in a place where you can have a successful career as an artist, but where are the financial conversations and how you manage those things? So I have spent, the past 2 weeks, and Hau and I had a very long call with an artist in the car the other night, just around managing for the future and what that actually looks like. Because look, the art market's going to do what the art market does. And I think it's a matter of being smart in those cycles, and smart when it's high and smart when it's not, and looking out for the long-term prospects of what things mean. And, for lots of these young artists, who are walk in with the mantra of, I'm going to be a star, and that's what it means. It's all those beginning conversations that build all the relationships, that builds all the storytelling, that builds a great foundation. So I would encourage anyone out there who's listening and painting and making a career of this, those relationships with collectors in the beginning they're really important and vital, and you keep those relationships going. So, this will all change and adjust, but, you just try to do as much as you can to make sure that as many people as possible get to see the work.
Let's see. Just saw a really great one. The Ollie Frame and cartridge concept is brilliant. Can it be reproduced as a box set available for purchase, perhaps as a gift to schools, so kids can physically interact with it and start conversations?
I'll do that.
I think that's fantastic.
I like that.
I'll do that.
That's
Done.
great. That's a good idea.
Done.
We have one about film. In light of your creative method and new work in filmmaking, are there directors with whom you're interested in confronting or exploring in terms of their portrayals of African Americans or other underrepresented groups?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about cinematographers as well, not just directors. But Sean Peters is somebody I absolutely love. Sean and I have worked together on a couple of different projects, but he and I talk about this a lot. It's really kind of fascinating to me, but not everybody can shoot Black people. I don't know how else to say it. I was trying to work around it, but there are films that are really good films, but our skin functions differently on the screen. And so some people don't know how to manage that. And as a painter, color being incredibly important to me, I can see that. I think Moonlight was a perfect example of it working well. That was just absolutely beautiful example of that. And so I'm not just looking at directors, but I'm also looking at cinematographers. I think for me, probably always, even though I don't like everything that he does, I don't know, man. Do the Right Thing is still one of my favorite movies of all time. I just think Spike is just brilliant. I still think he's crazy, but I think he's brilliant too.
We're jumping around a little bit here, but I want to hear the answer to this question too. The concept of absence is so powerful. Can you talk about how you developed this idea and how it's evolved in your paintings over time?
It evolved by trusting the work. It evolved as a complete accident. I was talking to somebody about this today. I am now at a place where I just do what the work says do. You'll be in the studio working on something and you'll feel the painting moving away from you. And you have the opportunity in that moment to follow the painting, or you can try to drag it back. And I have never had an experience where dragging it back creates a better work. Never. It never works that way. It's taken me a long time to learn that. It's taken me a very long time to figure that out. But the first time the absent thing happened in my painting was working on a painting in graduate school that I thought was in fact a failure. I had been working on this couple. There was a man and a woman in the composition. I worked on it, painted the best that I possibly could paint it. It was technically, functionally, formally working, but I couldn't figure it out. It just wasn't working. I just couldn't figure it out. And so I was sitting in front of the canvas, and I was cleaning off my palette and was like, yep, this is it. It's over. I just have to start over. And I cleaned my glass palette with a razor blade. And really, honestly, without even thinking about it, I walked over to the painting and I cut out one of the figures in the painting, and then went back to cleaning off my palette. And then at that moment, realized what I had done. It was like, oh, shoot, I cannot believe I just did that, because I had a critique the following day. So it was like, now I have this painting with this hole in this painting. I went home, I told my wife, I cut a hole in my painting. She's like, why'd you cut a hole in your painting? That's crazy, you have a critique. And I remember walking into the studio the next day and seeing the painting on the back wall and realizing that the painting worked. Like, it actually made a lot more sense. And as I thought about the history of the relationship between that man and that woman in the portrait, in that historical double portrait, what I realized is, in some ways, I was re-injuring this woman by forcing her to live throughout history next to this dude that she hated. So like, the painting didn't work until I was able to excise her from that context. So that was the first time absence was like functional in the work in that way, in a physical way.
I have another question about the physical manipulation. Your pieces are unbelievably striking. The physical alteration of your canvases evokes such a powerful message. After you put so much effort into replicating an original painting, mastering techniques, creating a sense of authenticity, do you remember a time that it was challenging to then take that destructive action to tell a richer story? And if so, what helped you overcome that?
Like I said, oftentimes it doesn't happen as a plan, right? Like, I probably wouldn't do it if I planned it, right? I probably would be like, am I really gonna spend 100 hours making this painting and then just like ball it up? I don't know if that makes sense. But it's about sitting with the work. And, you know, I move really quickly in my practice in the studio. My studio manager notes this sometimes. She's like, that's not the painting it was yesterday. What is going on? And so that's like, that energy is what keeps me excited in the studio. So things tend to happen pretty quickly. The other thing is, at this point in my career, like in my practice, I trust it. I'm not afraid of it anymore. Some things fail. But as I tell the artists I work with at NXTHVN all the time, if everything you do succeeds, you're not trying hard enough. You have to have failures. If you win every time, you need different competition. You're never going to grow. And so like, there are failures, there are things that don't work, or things I have to repaint over, or things that just, you know, get shredded up and go in the trash can or whatever. But by and large, it works for me. I remember, and this is the last part I'll say, that I remember seeing this group of Buddhist monks doing this sand mandala painting when I was in Santa Cruz, California. And I was just fascinated by the detail of the drawing. They're just sitting there with these metal tubes and they're tapping them and they get the sand out. Super, super detailed. I'm watching this with this group of people. And at the very end of it, they just blow the whole thing away. And I remember being there and like, I literally out loud went, what? Like, whoa. And apparently everybody else knew that was going to happen. I was the only person who didn't know that that's how the whole thing went. But that stayed with me. And I think about this idea of sacrificing that work, sacrificing that labor to get towards something, hopefully more.
Several questions about NXTHVN. One person asking about how it's been going through COVID. I'd also be interested to hear sort of your thoughts on what's important for the longevity of a program, or the programs there. You know, what do you see as key for keeping it going?
The key is for us to stay connected to our community.
Yeah.
That's the key. The key is to be a force for good and not a force for gentrification in the neighborhood. If in 10 years you come back and that neighborhood has had a major demographic shift where the folks who live there now can't afford to live there anymore, then I messed up. When I first started this project, I went door to door to talk to my neighbors and tell them about the project that we were doing. We that is me and Jason Price, my co-founder and collaborator on this project, have been thinking about broader development projects in our neighborhood to make sure that the people who live here now can afford to live here. We knew from the beginning that if we only thought about the art part of this conversation, that we would be giving into gentrification. It's like, in some ways, gentrification can be the path of least resistance. And so you have to find a way to shore up the walls and make sure that that doesn't happen. So for us, success really is connected to making sure that we stay connected to our community. I think the artists get it. I think the artists know it. I think we'll continue to attract the artists as long as we continue to be honest with them. That's our whole practice. Our whole project is about honesty. I open up my books, I open up my failures and talk about all of the mistakes I made in the art world, and then bring in curators and writers and collectors and friends to have those same kind of very candid campfire conversations where folks can just be honest about the challenges, which is not something that happens a whole lot in the art world. So
I think we have time for one more question. It's going to be hard to pick just one. What is the next exhibit at NXTHVN, and are there any volunteer needs, or how can people get involved?
So the next exhibition is our first solo project, actually. We're really excited about this. This is an amazing artist by the name of Christian Curiel. Christian is a figurative narrative painter whose stories tend to focus on children as they're developing into adulthood. And the paintings are surreal and strange and colorful. And we're very excited to have him as our first solo artist. I met Christian when I was at Yale. He was a class ahead of me. And so in many ways, it's kind of a homecoming. He's coming back to New Haven and doing something in the community, which is very important to him.
Fantastic. So I think we are out of time.
There's plenty of volunteer opportunities. Email hello@NXTHVN, and yeah, so.
Fantastic. And visit, everyone visit who can, because it's fantastic.
And give.
Yeah.
So I think that brings us to the end of our hour, sadly. I want to thank everyone that joined us today, especially our participants, Titus, Arthur, and Hau, for being here. And I invite everyone to join us for our next online artist conversation on Monday, September 27th at 12 p.m. with Hilton Als, staff writer and theater critic for The New Yorker and associate professor of writing at Columbia University, who will moderate a discussion on the future of museums. Thank you and have a great afternoon.